The candied yams were still steaming when Jacob Ellis looked me dead in my eyes and called me a broke embarrassment. Not under his breath, not in the kitchen where words disappear into steam and gossip. Right there at my mother's dining table on Willow Creek Lane in Stone Mountain, fork in his hand, gravy on the corner of his mouth, in front of everybody who mattered to me. "I'm just saying," he said, leaning back in Daddy's old chair like he'd paid for it himself. "Some of us build empires. Some of us ride the 8:15 bus to a cubicle for 14 years and call it a career." He laughed, and the sound bounced off my mother's china cabinet. "No offense, Talia." Let's take a quick break. Like this video and tell me where you're watching from. I'm curious to see which country shows up the most. Now, let's continue. There was offense. There was plenty of offense. But I didn't flinch, because flinching is exactly what he wanted. My sister Camille sat beside him in the blazer he'd bought her for their anniversary, and she laughed too. That nervous, apologetic laugh she'd been doing since college. The one that meant, "Please don't make this worse." My mother, Gloria, set her fork down hard enough that Nana Ruth looked up from her plate. Nobody corrected him. Nobody said a word. Here's what none of them knew. Sitting there in that dining room, smelling like fried chicken and cornbread and 30 years of Sunday dinners, I am the Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending at Peachtree Heritage Bank. I have been for 2 years, and sitting in a folder on my desk downtown, 40 floors above Peachtree Street, was a $2 million commercial construction loan application for Ellis Premier Builders, Jacob's company, that I had personally been shepherding through underwriting for 4 months. He had no idea, none of them did, that the broke embarrassment at his in-laws' table held the pen that could make his empire real or make it disappear. I smiled, passed the yams, and asked Nana Ruth about her hip. But that Sunday night, sitting alone in my 12-year-old Honda outside my mother's house, engine running for the heat, I stopped smiling. I sat with my hands on the wheel and I made myself a promise. I was done protecting a man who had never once protected me. I just didn't know yet how far that promise would take me. To understand what I did next, you have to understand why I hid for so long. I was 19 when my father, Walter Boykins, died of a heart attack in the parking lot of the Kroger, where he'd worked nights for 11 years. There was no life insurance policy worth mentioning. There was a mortgage, a car note, and a 17-year-old sister who still needed braces. I got a job as a teller at Peachtree Heritage the same month I buried him. I told myself it was temporary. 12 years later, I was still there, just 40 floors higher, with a title, a parking spot, and a salary I never once mentioned at family dinner. My mother taught me that. "Don't flaunt what the Lord gave you," she used to say. "Somebody's always watching to take it." She'd learned it the hard way. Her own brother, my Uncle Perry, bought a new truck the same year his auto shop got broken into 3 times, robbed by men who'd been at his cookout. After that, quiet became our family's love language. You didn't announce what you had. You just made sure everybody was fed. So I drove a used Accord with a cracked bumper. I shopped the clearance rack at Marshall's, and for 3 years, I quietly paid my mother's property tax bill every October and refilled her blood pressure prescription every month, and I never told a soul, including Camille. To my family, I was something at a bank. To Jacob, I was a punchline waiting to happen. The insult at dinner didn't come from nowhere. It landed on a bruise that had been forming since I was 22. Since the first time a man who loved my sister decided my silence meant I had nothing to be proud of. I drove home that night, past the exit for my old apartment, past the storage unit where I still kept Daddy's tools, and I thought about the file waiting on my desk. 4 months I'd been quietly steering that loan through committee, giving Jacob the benefit of every doubt a man in my family deserved. I decided Monday morning I was finally going to actually read it. Monday, 7:40 a.m., 33rd floor, Peachtree Heritage Bank headquarters. "You look like you slept in that chair," said Diane Whitfield, my boss, EVP of Commercial Banking, leaning in my doorway with her coffee. Diane was 54, silver-streaked locks, and the only person in the building who called me by my full name, Natalia, like it still meant something formal and worth respecting. Rough weekend, I said. Well, wake up. Because Friday's the committee vote on Ellis Premier Builders, and corporate wants a recommendation memo from you by Wednesday. 2 million's a big number for a company that size. She tapped the folder on my desk. You've had this one a while. I had. 4 months. Since it landed on my desk from a departing colleague, and I'd told myself the family connection didn't require disclosure because I wasn't the original underwriter. I was just the sign-off. I'd told myself a lot of things. After Diane left, I opened the file properly for the first time. Ellis Premier Builders, LLC, requested $2 million, 7.2% interest, 24-month construction term, for a mixed-use retail development on the Cascade Road corridor. Personal guarantee required from both principals. Both principals. My stomach dropped. Camille's signature was on page 11. My sister, who didn't even run the company, had personally guaranteed $2 million, with their paid-off house listed as supplemental collateral. If this loan ever defaulted, it wasn't just Jacob's dream that burned, it was my sister's home. Then I saw it, a flagged system alert I'd let sit for 3 weeks. Revenue discrepancy. Schedule C figures do not reconcile with submitted profit and loss statement. Recommend further review. I'd seen that flag in October and told myself I'd get to it. Sitting there Monday morning, still tasting Sunday's humiliation, I finally clicked it open. Something in that file didn't add up, and for the first time in 4 months, I actually wanted to know why. Thursday night, Ellis Premier Builders threw a groundbreaking mixer at the future construction site off Cascade Road. String lights strung between 2 cranes, a catering truck serving shrimp and grits, family invited to celebrate what Jacob called the next chapter. His business partner, Andre Fulton, a tall man in a suit that fit a little too well, raised a glass. To Jacob Ellis, he said, the man who's about to put Ellis Premier on the map. $2 million, y'all. The paperwork's basically a formality at this point. Peachtree Heritage came through big for us. I stood near the back, holding a plastic cup of lemonade, knowing exactly how far, basically a formality, was from the truth. Jacob spotted me and pulled me forward by the elbow, grinning for the small crowd. Everybody, this is my sister-in-law, Talia. She works at a bank, entry-level, I think, tellers, loans, something like that. Andre's smile faltered, embarrassed on my behalf. Camille laughed her nervous laugh again and looked at her shoes. I said nothing. I've learned silence can be its own kind of receipt, one you cash later. An hour in, refilling my cup near the catering tent, I heard Jacob and Andre behind a stack of folded tables, voices low. The bank's not gonna dig into the summit grading invoices, are they? Andre asked. Nah, Jacob said. I handled the numbers. Long as it looks clean on paper, they don't ask questions past the P&L. Banks move too fast to check receipts from a company that's not even theirs. I stood frozen behind the tent, lemonade sweating in my hand, my heart pounding louder than the DJ's speakers. Summit Grading Solutions. I'd seen that name Monday morning. $187,000 in invoices sitting right in his file. I walked back to my car that night without saying goodbye to anyone, already knowing Wednesday's memo was going to look very different than Jacob expected. Saturday, my mother's blood pressure spiked hard enough to send her to Emory Decatur by ambulance. I was there in 11 minutes, before Camille, before anyone, sitting in a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and vending machine coffee, filling out her insurance forms because I still had her Medicare card memorized. Jacob showed up 40 minutes later, still in his golf clothes, checking his watch. I had a meeting I had to leave, he said, like that was the headline of the day. When the nurse said Gloria would be fine, just needed observation overnight, he exhaled loud with relief. That sounded a lot like annoyance. She does this every few months, probably just stressed over nothing. I quietly told the front desk I'd cover the copay, the way I always did, and Jacob overheard. He looked at me, really looked, the way you look at something you've decided isn't worth much, and said the thing I will never forget as long as I live. You know what your problem is, Talia? You act like being broke makes you noble. It just makes you tired and irrelevant. Camille and I are the ones who are going to take care of this family when it actually matters, not you. I stood there under those fluorescent hospital lights, mints and antiseptic thick in the air, and something in me went very, very still. Not angry, past angry, clear. I had spent 4 months quietly protecting the loan of a man who wouldn't spend 4 seconds protecting me. I had spent 3 years paying my mother's bills in secret while he called me irrelevant in her hospital hallway. I had shrunk myself at every table so people like Jacob Ellis could feel tall. You're right, I told him, calm as still water. It does matter who takes care of this family when it counts. He smirked, thinking he'd won something. He had no idea what he'd just started. Sunday, instead of family dinner, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, 3 cups of coffee, and the full Ellis Premier Builders file open in front of me. I wasn't looking for a reason to hurt Jacob. I was finally, properly, doing my job. Summit Grading Solutions, the company behind $187,000 in invoices listed as recent expenses, had been administratively dissolved by the Georgia Secretary of State 14 months earlier. A dead company, billing a live loan file. 2 more vendor invoices, totaling $94,000, traced back to a P.O. box registered to Andre Fulton's cousin, and buried in a civil filings database. An active lawsuit, filed 6 weeks prior, from a subcontractor named Reyes Concrete Group, seeking $340,000 in unpaid work on a prior Ellis Premier project. A material liability Jacob had never disclosed on his application, required disclosure, plainly checked none, on page 4. Falsified invoices, an undisclosed lawsuit, a company using my sister's signature and my sister's home as collateral for a foundation built on paper that didn't exist. This wasn't about Sunday dinner anymore. If this loan closed and later collapsed under its own fraud, Camille's name, and possibly her freedom, would be tied to a federal bank fraud statute right alongside his. Exposing this now wasn't revenge. It was the only way to actually protect my sister, even if she'd hate me for it at first. My hands shook as I opened a new document and started typing the referral memo, my badge number automatically stamped in the header. Not a cancellation out of spite. A formal, documented, by-the-book fraud referral. Exactly what any loan officer is required to file when they discover falsified financial documents. I read it 4 times before I let myself hit send to compliance at 11:47 that night. Then I sat in the dark and waited for Monday. Monday morning, I walked the referral memo personally to Renata Sloan, the bank's fraud and BSA compliance officer, a soft-spoken woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain who had a reputation for missing nothing. "You flagged this yourself?" she asked, scanning the dissolved LLC, the P.O. box, the undisclosed lawsuit. "I should have caught it in October," I said honestly. "I'm catching it now." By Wednesday, compliance had confirmed everything: the dead vendor, the relative's mailbox, the omitted litigation. By Thursday, Diane called me into her office, closing the door behind her. "Talia, I need you to understand something," she said carefully. "This isn't just a denial. Falsifying financial documents on a federal adjacent commercial loan is bank fraud under Georgia and federal law. Legal's already drafting a referral to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. This is out of committee's hands now." I nodded, throat tight, because I already knew what that meant for my family before she finished the sentence. "The denial letter goes out today," Diane added. "Standard notice. It'll reach him by Saturday." I thought about Camille's signature on page 11. I thought about the house. What happens to guarantors who weren't aware of the fraud? I asked, careful to keep my voice level. "If she can demonstrate she didn't know and didn't benefit from the falsified information, she's typically protected," Renata said. "The exposure sits with whoever submitted false documents. That's Jacob." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in a week. I didn't do this to destroy my sister's life. I did it, in the end, to save it, even if she wasn't going to see it that way for a while. Saturday was 2 days away. So was Sunday dinner. The denial letter arrived Saturday afternoon. By 6 o'clock, Jacob was standing in my mother's living room, waving it like a subpoena. "Somebody at that bank sabotaged me," he shouted, pacing in front of Nana Ruth's recliner. 14 years I've been building this company, and some pencil pusher decided to torch $2 million over paperwork. Camille sat frozen on the couch, pale, her phone clutched in both hands, having just gotten off a call with her own attorney about what guarantor liability meant. Jacob's eyes landed on me. "You work at a bank," he said slowly, something clicking. "Which bank, Talia?" The room went silent. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway. Nana Ruth set down her tea. "Peachtree Heritage," I said. "Senior Vice President, Commercial Lending. I've had your file on my desk since April." Jacob's face drained of color, then flooded red. "You did this." I referred a file that contained invoices from a dissolved company, a lawsuit you hid on your application, and forged documentation. I said, steady, because I'd rehearsed this moment in my head every night that week. "I didn't sabotage your loan, Jacob. I stopped you from committing federal bank fraud with my sister's name and my mother's roof attached to it." My mother sat down hard on the arm of the sofa. Nana Ruth's mouth had fallen open. Camille looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, or maybe, for the first time, actually seeing me. "You could have told us," Camille whispered. "I could have," I said. "But I've been telling this family who I am for years, in every quiet bill I paid, and every promotion I never mentioned. Nobody was listening. Jacob made sure of that at every table we've sat at together." Jacob stormed out, slamming the screen door so hard it bounced off the frame. Nobody moved to stop him. Camille sat in the wreckage of her marriage's finances and finally asked me the only question that mattered. "Can you stay? I need to tell you something." We sat on our mother's back porch, the same porch we used to share popsicles on as girls, and Camille finally told me the truth she'd been carrying alone. "I've known something was wrong for almost a year," she said, voice shaking. "Jacob started sleeping in the office. Money disappeared from our joint account, small amounts, then bigger ones. When I asked, he said I wouldn't understand business." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out he took a private, high-interest loan against our equipment 6 months ago to cover a debt he never told me about. The same debt from that lawsuit you found." "Camille, let me finish." Her eyes were wet. "I let him talk about you the way he did, because admitting something was wrong with him felt like admitting something was wrong with my choices. It was easier to laugh along than to ask myself why I married a man who needed to make my sister small to feel big." She reached over and took my hand. "I'm so sorry, Talia, for every dinner, every joke I let slide. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't, not yet, but I squeezed her hand back. "You're protected," I told her. "Compliance confirmed it. You didn't know about the false documents. You don't inherit his exposure. The house is safe." Camille exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a year. "I already called a lawyer about the marriage," she admitted, "before I even knew about the fraud referral. I've been unhappy a long time, Talia. I just didn't have anywhere to put it." "You have somewhere now," I said. "You have me." For the first time since we were girls sharing a bedroom on Willow Creek Lane, my sister and I talked until 2 in the morning. No performing, no laughing along, just the truth, finally allowed to sit at the table with us. 3 months later, Ellis Premier Builders dissolved formally under an active federal fraud investigation. Jacob moved to Charlotte to start over, a phrase my family now says with a specific, knowing silence. Andre Fulton was named in the same referral. Camille filed for divorce and moved back in with our mother temporarily, and every Tuesday night, she and I sit at my kitchen table, going over her budget, her credit, her plan, not because I have to, but because she finally asked. Diane Whitfield promoted me that same quarter to Regional Director of Commercial Banking, citing, in her words, the kind of integrity you can't teach. I bought a house in Decatur 2 months after that, a real one, with my name on the deed and nobody else's, 4 bedrooms and a porch big enough for the whole family. Sunday dinner is back at my mother's table now, and I don't shrink at it anymore. When Nana Ruth asked what exactly I do at that bank, I told her, plainly, proudly, no apology in it. She reached over and patted my hand. "Girl," she said, "why you been hiding all that?" I thought about that question for a long time after. I thought about Jacob's voice in that hospital hallway, calling me tired and irrelevant. I thought about every Sunday I passed the yams and swallowed my own worth to keep the peace. I don't do that anymore. I used to shrink myself so nobody else would ever feel small next to me. Not anymore. These days, I take up exactly as much room at that table as I've earned. And baby, that's a whole lot of room. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If it kept you hooked, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe for more unforgettable stories, and tell me in the comments what you think happened after the ending. I'd love to read your theories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.